One of the hardest things about eating vegan isn't the day-to-day meals, it's the big holidays, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to start new traditions for yourself. For Christmas, I had figured out what I wanted to do each year. I've decided on doing a lasagna, and it's been wonderful. But Thanksgiving is something I've always struggled with, right from the very beginning. I have tried every single store-bought loaf, roll, beast, whatever you want to call them, and they never seem to really hit the spot. And that's when I came up with my solution, pot pie. I decided that for every year on Thanksgiving, I was going to make myself an amazing pot pie to celebrate all of the harvest and all of the bounty of the season, which it really is what Canadian Thanksgiving is all about. Everything that goes into this recipe should be seasonal wherever you are in Canada through the month of October, and it's pretty easy to replicate or change out things depending on what you find that's easier for you to get in store. For me, I'm using the vegetables out of my CSA box from Glen Valley Organic Farms for the most part. The only thing I had to buy was the yam, but everything is a little bit of odd sizes when you get them from an organic farm, so I weigh out all of my produce. The recipe will have it say, I think, 2 stalks of celery, for example, and as you can see, it's slightly more on my plate, but I weigh it out just to make sure it's about average. And the big key is weighing your yam. Now this yam is 600 grams. It's a 600 gram yam. It's pretty easy to remember, but yams and sweet potatoes vary greatly in size depending on when you're buying them in stores. So I think making sure you have the weight of the mushrooms and the weight of the yams is totally key, and then everything else you can just sort of adjust based on, small, medium, large, what you have around. Same thing with the vegetable broth. I have a beefless vegetable broth that I'm using here, but if you want to make something from a bouillon that's also vegan, that's totally fine as well. You just need 2 cups of the liquid. As always, you can find the full recipe with instructions at raincoastvegan.com. The other big key for any holiday cooking is to stay calm and relaxed as much as you can. So what I'm doing here is putting together my mise en place. I want everything portioned out and cut up and ready so that when I start the cooking process, I just have to add ingredients as they're ready to go in the pot. So let's sit back and start prepping the meal. Now here's my mise en place, all on dishes that can easily go in the dishwasher after, which is another key, making sure cleanup is a breeze. I have the biggest pan that I own with high sides, and I put some olive oil in there and then added my mirepoix, my celery, onion, and carrot to start cooking. And don't forget salt and pepper, obviously. You want to cook them until they start to go a little translucent. You're not trying to fry them, you're just trying to break them down a little bit before we start adding any other ingredients. Once the mirepoix is a little bit soft, you're going to add in all of your yams and give that a really good stir, as well as the garlic and the thyme. Next, you're going to add in all of the oyster mushrooms to get those all combined and everything start cooking. You want to cook this not till super crispy. You want to get the mushrooms to start breaking down, and you want to cook it just until the yams start to get tender. And while that is over there cooking, it's time to roll out your pastry dough. I'm using the Dufour vegan pastry dough. You can get it at Vegan Supply here in Canada. You flour the surface, you have to sort of defrost this ahead of time, and then you roll it out just like you would any other pastry. I don't make this myself, I buy it. You can make vegan pastry yourself, but it is just, you know, one of those things that I think personally is worth just paying for somebody else to do. Rolling it out with a rolling pin is as much work as I want to do on pastry at any time. I am not great working with dough, to be perfectly honest. I have very hot hands, so I try to work as quickly as possible. Just a reminder, whenever you are working with flour, flour is raw and can contain salmonella, so make sure you wash down your surfaces really well afterwards. Now that the vegetables have cooked down a bit, you want to add in some of the Wizard's Worcestershire sauce. It's a vegan Worcestershire sauce. Normal Worcestershire has anchovies in it, so you do have to buy the vegan stuff. But if you look now, you'll see that the yams have just started to get tender. You can press them in with your wooden spoon, and that's about the point that you want it to be. Next up, we need to thicken. So put in half a cup of pastry flour. I use whole wheat pastry flour. You can use all-purpose if you want to, if that's what you have on hand. And you want to mix this all in very well, and you need to cook out the flour. You need to give it enough time to cook down. You don't want it to stick to the bottom, so make sure you stir it around and keep an eye on it, and it will look a little gloopy on your vegetables. That is totally normal. That is what we're looking for. You just cook the flour out a little bit until everything looks thick and slightly too tight, and then what you're going to do is start adding in your broth. You want to add a little bit in the beginning to sort of loosen up all that flour that's gotten everything sticky together, and then I like to slowly incorporate the rest of the broth until you have used up all the 2 cups. At this point, the broth is still way too clear. You are wanting to get that to thicken up. That is what's going to hold your pot pie together. Give it time. While you're doing that, preheat the oven to 375. You want it to start to bubble and thicken and look like that. And then at a certain point, once it's bubbled, when you start to put your wooden spoon through it, you're going to see that it gets really thick and doesn't move back in when you turn it around. Once you've reached this consistency here, you're ready to take it off the stove, and you are going to transfer it into your pot pie dish. Whatever oven-safe pot pie dish you've decided to use. I'm using my Le Creuset dish here. Transfer over your pastry top, and you just want to sort of crimp the edges in around the outer ridges of the pan. You want to tuck them in basically. You need to have some of the juices escaping, otherwise things are not going to work out for you. It's going to be too liquidy and it's going to trap everything in and it's just going to fail. So you need to tuck it in on the sides and cut a vent on the top, and then you throw it in the oven for about an hour, 50 to 60 minutes, depending on how hot your oven runs. Then most importantly, when you take it out, let it sit for at least 10 minutes. This does serve 6 to 8 people, depending on how hungry you are, and it does freeze well. So if you're just like me, feeding one vegan, don't worry, you don't have to eat it all week long. You can just throw some in the freezer for later. But it is crispy, crunchy. That Dufour pastry is a really great option, and it was a really filling, beautiful way to celebrate the harvest this year. For the full recipe, check out rainbowcoastvegan.com and let me know in the comments what you had for Thanksgiving, what your family tradition is, what you like to enjoy as a vegan. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving.